Welcome back to the Always Reading Book Club. It is your girl Kiki Reader, and we are going to do a duet series today. So this duet series is called the Affair series, and it is by Stacey Lynn, and book one is called Entice. We meet Lori Baker, and she's in her driveway, and she's getting ready to pull off, and her husband James is asking her again to forgive him and to please come back. So we find out that James has slept with Becky. I think her real name is Rebecca, but she calls her Becky, and so that's going to be her name. So Becky also works with James, but she is also one of Lori's best friends since college. So about 4 weeks ago, she learned of the one night, allegedly just one night, that James and Becky spent together because she walked in on them having a conversation about it in her kitchen. So of course this has been like an extremely difficult time for her, wrapping around her mind around the fact that, her husband slept with her best friend slept with her husband. Like, just betrayal on just so many levels. So thankfully she has a conference coming up. She's an executive assistant to this medical company, to the CEO, and she has a conference in Chicago. She lives in Denton, Michigan, I think it's called. And so she's getting away. And so that was why he asked her, please come back. Because he's kind of afraid of what she's going to do. And she is like, she needs this time to just kind of figure out, is she going to stay or is she going to leave for good? She gets to Chicago, gets to the hotel. Her brain, of course, is going back and forth. She's still trying to think of, was there a glance that she missed between the two of them? Like, trying to think of any kind of signs that could have given her the possibility that something like this could have happened between Becky and James. So she's coming up with nothing. And because she's not paying attention, she runs into a nice hard body. This body belongs to Liam Parker. And of course she feels instant chemistry. Scares her a little bit because it's super intense. She tells him her name, Lori Baker, and he asks her to have a drink later. And she blurts out, "I'm married." And he's like, "Okay, do you still want to get the drink?" And she's like, "I'm married." He's like, "I heard you the first time." But he was still wanting to have the drink with her. And she was just completely floored. And she's thinking, she does want to see him again. She does want to go and have this drink. But she's also going like, this was the time I was supposed to be figuring out, if I still want to be in this marriage. And she's starting to think, leaning more towards that thing. Even before she bumped into him, like, does she really even have anything to fight for in her marriage? Because that's like super brutal. Like, your best friend screwed your husband. That's so brutal. Like, you could have chose anybody else to screw, and you choose to screw someone that is that close to me. I don't know if I would even want to fight for that shit. I'm just saying. I don't, because it's just like, it's awful if you do a random person. That's messed up as well. But it's the idea of you doing it so close to me. That to me feels like you wanted to hurt me even more so, because you're not going to tell me the thought never crossed your mind that this is my wife's best friend or one of my wife's best friends. Like, why would I want to do this to her? I don't know. To me, it just seems a little bit more malicious. And to me, it's nothing to forgive. I just would have been done. But that's my little mini rant. So Lori calls her friend Talia. This is her other best friend, and what I'll say her true best friend, and tells her about the interaction with the Liam guy and his offer for drinks. So Talia's like, you should go. Talia and Lori, they've been friends since college as well, but she met Talia like a year or two after she started college. So she has known Becky longer by like one or 2 years. Talia doesn't want to settle down. That's not her thing. She's just not into it. And so, of course she's going to be like, yeah, go have a drink. Talia does feel like this is something she should do, not sleep with the man. She just feels like she should go and have that drink, have some conversation, kind of show her that there are other men out there that would desire her, because what has happened in this affair to Lori is that she has become so filled with this self-doubt of who she is, and it blew a big blow to her confidence. You know what I'm saying? Like, you think you have a good marriage. Not saying that it's perfect, but you thinking you got someone that loves you and someone that wouldn't hurt you necessarily in this way. Not to say that you can have this thought process that no man's going to cheat. You know, I'm not saying she thought that. But just that level of betrayal of screwing someone so close to me. I don't think she took that as something James would ever do to her. So, of course, it's going to make her brain go, well, what is wrong with me? That's going to be the first thought. Because when you cheat on people, that's where the person's mind goes. What is wrong with me? And so, being that it's taken a hit, her ego, her confidence, whatever, Talia feels like you need to see that other men, they're going to look at you. You're not going to be alone forever, because she's 29. And she's like, you know, if I decide to get a divorce, I'll be divorced before I'm 30. And that's just so sad. And so Talia just kind of wants her to see, listen, there are men out there that will find you attractive, that will, you know, view you in high esteem. They exist. And this is a way for her to see it. Again, she did not push her. She's not like, oh, you need to see what's out there or get back at him. She's just saying you need to just put yourself in a situation to kind of see that. In other words, baby girl, you still got it. And so our girl, Lori, decides to go downstairs and have this drink at the bar. The minute he put his hand on the small of her back as she sat down, the girl felt pure electricity. And it just automatically made her wet. And she was just like, oh shit. So they don't have a lot of conversation. It's just pretty much, you know, he ordered them drinks. He asked her if she's nervous. She, of course, said she was. He says he doesn't want her to be nervous. She asks, you know, what do you want? Just a one night stand. And he's like, you can say one night stand. I would prefer a night of passion, or a night of forgetting all of your pain. And basically letting her know he was just going to give her so many orgasms. And he was going to fuck her until she could barely walk the next day. That's what he said to her. So, you know, the girl is like all set to go upstairs with it. On her way up to the room, she had like a moment of regret. She's thinking about the fact that she's known James since she was 14 years old. And, you know, they were really experimental in the beginning. I'm like, of course, if you're young, you're trying to figure out stuff. And she did notice, like, the past year or so, it had got kind of bland between the two of them. And I'm quite sure that's probably what he's going to say. That's the reason for his affair, right? But again, these are things that you could have just said, hey, let's liven this shit up. We need to do a little bit more fun stuff in the bedroom. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that difficult to say that. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes people, especially when they say they have such a comfort level with someone, it's like, okay, do you really have that comfort level? Because why couldn't you just say that? Him to her and her to him. You know what I'm saying? Because you noticed that there was a difference, you know? Because even more so, that makes me feel like you didn't want to say it, because if you say it, particularly in James's, from his whole side, if he had just said that, now you don't have an excuse to go fuck Becky, right? Because now you've said something to your wife, and now she has the, you know, the space or the ability to see if she can liven it up, you know? But you did that and you didn't say anything because that was going to be the excuse that you were going to fall back on, which even more so lets me know another reason why I wouldn't be able to forgive and would be like, this is not going to work, because that shit's purposeful. I'm sorry. There's no fucking way you can tell me you fucking my best friend like that just happened to happen, you know? Oh, it just happened. There's no way. That shit, that's fucking planned. You clearly wanted to do that. So much so that you were willing to not give me the opportunity to like fix or like work on, let me say it like that, because it shouldn't be left to one person to fix anything, but like work on that part of our relationship. you know? That was just my little mini rant. While they're in the elevator, they start kissing hardcore. It is just beyond passion, something she clearly has not had in a very long time. So they get inside, and of course, he has this large penthouse suite. He takes her over to the window, pulls up her dress, starts fingering her, and then takes the fingers out of her pussy and puts them in her mouth, and she sucks them. And then he tells her that he's going to fuck her against the window, and she's going to wonder if people on the streets can see her getting fucked. And the girl is completely turned on. But then he takes her and he puts her on the bed. He makes her come just by like sucking on her nipples and biting them. Like, it was so erotic for her, and so she came that way. So then he finally goes to gets the condom and fucks her into oblivion. And then when they're done, he goes to get to one washcloth, wipes her down. She's thinking like, okay, this is it, because she figured it would just be that one time. Dude told her, no, I told you one night, and we're just getting started. So, of course, they have their night of, how do I say this? Just explosive sex. They did it probably like another 3 or 4 times that night. Before he wakes up, she puts her clothes on and she gets out of there. So, remember I said Lori works for a medical company, and she's the executive assistant to the CEO owner of that company. So, the owner's name is Ann, and Ann used to work for Lori's father. So when Lori got out of college, Ann had invented some new medical device, and she wanted to strike out on her own. And so her father recommended her to Ann, like, hey, bring her on, because she was fresh out of college. And so Ann did. And so they have, grown this company, because she didn't want to work for her father. She wanted to be able to do her own thing. So even though, her father put in a good word for her, she works her ass off, and she does a phenomenal job. And that's why Ann was so comfortable sending her to this conference, because she had to take care of some things herself. So at one of the lectures, poor girl, she ain't paying attention. Girl, mine is stuck on last night. She is stuck on Lynn. So finally, she gets back to her room later that evening, and there's champagne on ice and a red baby doll negligee. So she gets a knock on the door. Of course, it's Liam. He comes in, and she's like, I take it you're the one that left the gift? And he's like, yep. And she was like, I thought we said just one night. And he said, well, one night wasn't enough. I want 2. So he tells her to put on the baby doll negligee and to do it in front of him, and she does. But she's hungry, so she's like, can we eat first? So they eat. So after they eat, of course, they have another incredible night. We do find a little bit about him while they were eating. He is from London, so he does have a slight accent. He lived there until he was 12, and he's been in the States since. She was kind of scared to ask him any more questions, because, again, this is supposed to be anything long term. So it's kind of like the less questions, the better. So in the morning, they have another session. He eats her pussy wonderfully. Afterwards, she goes to brush her teeth. Her phone rings. She freaks out a little bit. It's a text message. It's from James, and it says, I miss you. I love you. Please come home. Please come back to me. So Liam sees it and says, that's the husband? And she's like, yep. And so now she's starting to feel guilty about what she's done, even though I don't feel like she should. But again, to each his own. So he leaves, and the whole weight of everything is coming down on her. And she feels even more guilty than she initially did in the beginning. So she just got a lot. I feel kind of bad for her. Again, I don't feel like she should take on that much guilt. I feel like you shouldn't open certain doors if that's not what you want. Like, if you don't want your wife fucking somebody else, you probably shouldn't fuck somebody else, especially her friend. Because at that point, all bets are off. First of all, like I said, I don't even care about a reconciliation. I'm just fucking done. because you clearly like to find ways to hurt me to the core. So I wouldn't trust it. So she goes to meet with Ann for brunch, and Ann tells her that she has sold the fucking company. Now, she knew Ann was working on something that was top secret, because normally, like, Ann lets her in on everything. They are actual friends, but she also works so closely with her in the business, you know, so she normally knows about everything that's going on, but it came to this thing, she was very secretive. So of course she takes this as complete betrayal, right? Because she's working off of what James just did to her. James just did something behind her back, and now she's looking at Ann just sold the company behind my back, even though this is not your company. This is Ann's company, right? And maybe she didn't tell you because she didn't want to hear your mouth on what you felt she should do. Maybe she was trying to make a decision based on solely what she wanted to do, because don't get it twisted. Yes, you work here. You're the executive assistant. We work super close together, but this is still her shit, you know? And she doesn't have to tell you exactly what she's going to do, especially if she's trying to figure it out. But again, I know that Lori's just upset because it just feels like another betrayal for her, because she's still trying to work through what her husband did to her. So Lori storms off, and apparently later on that day they're going to make an announcement at the conference. And so she leaves. She comes back a little while later. She can barely even sit by Ann because she's so pissed off. So then Ann tells her, I know you're upset with me, but, you know, we do kind of need to give a united front now on this end. Now, another thing, she did tell her while they were at the brunch, Ann told her that it was worked into the deal that the new CEO would keep her on as the executive assistant. So that again right there lets me know she did think about you. She wasn't leaving you high and dry and just didn't give a fuck what happened to you after she sold it and left. You know, she was trying to make sure you still had a job and you were still going to be okay. You know? So to me, it is not the same thing that she's trying to equate it to. It's just not. Now, at the same time, this is your company. I really don't need to give you a united front either. Like sometimes people be like, you know, well, it's my shit. Yeah, it's your shit. So then you can also go up there and you can announce it yourself. I don't need to be up here, you know? So that was my only thing, because I probably wouldn't have gone up there with her. But reluctantly, Lori does go up there with her, and they started to make the announcement. And they said the fucking name, Liam Parker. Lori, of course, freaks out and she storms off. She doesn't even stay for the full announcement because she's like, I got to get out of here. So she goes back to her hotel room, falls on the floor, and just cries and cries and cries. So she's getting ready to leave. She packs up and she's like, you know what? I need to go say my piece. So she goes, storms over to his penthouse suite, bams on the door, demands to know when did he know, and he lets her know that he knew it. I guess like that previous morning he knew who she was, but initially he did not know who she was. He then says to her, I wanted you and the consequences be damned. And it was pissing her off that even as pissed off as she was at that very moment, she could have still dropped to her knees and sucked him off. It was just like, that's what she wanted to do. So she doesn't know if she's going to stay on working for him. He keeps telling her, no, no, you need to stay. And she's like, I don't know if I can do it. He was like, we just have to put this behind us. And he said, even though I don't want to, I will. And he was like, if you show up on Monday, then I know this is over. And so she was like, okay, fine. I'll let you know, Mr. Parker, on Monday with my decision. So she leaves with a thought in her head. Does that mean that if I don't show up on Monday, we can keep this going? So she heads back to Denton, and she knows by the time she reaches the door that there's no going back. This really is the end of her marriage. James had set up this beautiful table display. It was kind of like a replica of their honeymoon that they had in Costa Rica. And she broke down crying when she saw it. And he, of course, was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you upset. I was just trying to get you to remember. But it's like, she doesn't need to remember. You were the one that needed to remember before you went and chose to do what you did. So they cried a lot, and they decided that this was going to be it. He, of course, didn't want it. But, I mean, she had already decided. They talked about stuff and what they were going to do with the house. She let him know she was going to get a divorce attorney so they could kind of start the procedure. He, of course, let her know, if you change your mind, like, let me know. And she's like, I'm not going to. So her thing is, she knew she wouldn't have been able to have been with Liam if there was really any real hope for her and James to really reconcile. And he would have never done what he did if what they had was worth being saved. And so that's the outcome. So it's Monday morning. She hasn't been answering her phone at all. Text messages or phone calls, because she just can't handle anything right now. So she goes into work on Monday morning. She gets there super early. She is panicking. She is still upset with Anne. She knows eventually she's going to get over it, but right now she's still pissed. She goes to the break room a little bit later on, and Sheila shows up. Sheila works there. I forget what she does. But Sheila has seen the boss, and she's like, oh my gosh, talk about sex on a stick. She wants him. And Laura's just kind of like, whatever. And she's like, I didn't even know he was here. And the girl was like, oh, I forgot, you're married. You don't see anybody. And Laura was like, I'm married, not dead. So Sheila's like, well, basically put in a good word with him, hook me up. So then she goes back to her desk, and of course he pops up. He calls her name, and of course it has an effect on her, and she has to go in and meet with him. So they have to go through the calendar. He wants her at every meeting. He says it's because of her expertise, but I think it's a little bit of both wanting her near, and also because she did work with Anne, closely pretty much on almost everything. So he does tell her, I need your decision by the end of the day. And, pretty much if you can deal with this, or if you can't, like, basically I need a decision. So real quick, I did forget to say, she also let him know that she had only been with like 2 men in her whole life. So this might take her a little longer to get over than it would be for somebody like him who just fucks, Her and Talia go have dinner at like this Italian restaurant that she normally goes to for all kind of celebrations. And of course, all those celebratory dinners float through her mind. They have dinner. She tells her everything that happened. Talia is completely shocked because Talia really did not think that she was going to sleep with the guy. She really just thought she was just going to have a drink, get her confidence back. She did not think all that was going to happen. So she pretty much just told her, you take your time. You be kind to yourself. Eventually it'll get better. You will figure everything out. Don't feel like you have to rush to do it. And she shouldn't. Honestly, she shouldn't have had to rush and have a decision, to me, by the time she came back from a conference. If I'm taking too long, then we can just make the answer no. You know what I'm saying? Because that's a lot for somebody to have to fucking process and deal with. And it's like he has to take into consideration, you caused her pain. And now it's like you want her to be able to just get over it. That shit don't work like that. You hurt that woman to the core. That takes a lot of time. And to me, a fucking month is not enough. And if he needed a quick answer, like I said, then the answer just would have been fucking no, and you can leave. Period. That was my little mini rant. Lori has also been having dreams about Liam every night since their first night. And she's had them so much so every morning she wakes up like in almost like this sweat because she has these intense dreams about this man. And she's just kind of like, shit, like, this shit gotta stop or I'm just gonna lose my mind. So she goes to work. She's doing a great job. She gets a message from reception that there's a gift for her. So she gets the gift. It's flowers, but it's not just any flowers. It's the flowers that James got for her for prom. And she realizes, like, he's trying to get me to remember. And then she's also thinking, if only I could stop thinking about Liam. Well, Liam is standing next to the flowers, and he looks pissed. So when she goes to reach for the note, which was handwritten by James, he looks and he's like, are these from your husband? And he looks at the flowers like he just wants to toss them in the trash. He's just so disgusted. So she's like, yes, they are. She reads the note to herself. And of course, it's like, I've gone a week without you, and that's a week too long. Please, let's call this off. I love you. Let's try and make this work. So she takes the flowers. End of day comes. She goes into the office because Liam called her in there. And she's like, what do you need? He's like, come here. Let me show you something. So she goes over to his desk. And he basically wants to change the design of the prototype. And they have this like back and forth. And she realizes what he's saying does make sense. It would be better. But it also means it's going to push back the rollout date to like months later. And initially what she had agreed to do was stay on until the end of the project. So clearly, he's trying to keep her around because as long as she's there, like he can, keep having this, influence kind of over her, like in other words, like she can't forget about him, because he's steady in her face, So he let her know that he has jacked off to her every day this week. And when she's like, Liam, he's like, I never thought I'd hear you say my name again. And he starts fingering her and she lets him. And girl is just gone. She comes on his fingers. It's absolutely crazy. And he says to her, has your husband been making you happy? And of course, he's saying this and he's like fingering her. So she tells the truth and she says he moved out. And he says, I don't do relationships. And she's like, okay. And so he tells her, you're coming home tonight. And at first she's like, no. And he's like, no, you are. And then she's like, yeah, I am. She follows him back to his penthouse condo thingy. And it, of course, is absolutely beautiful. But it's kind of cold, right? It's not like warm and inviting. So she asks him, how long has he been there? He says a week. She asks him, why did you leave parkour, which was apparently a family business. But he tells her, I'm not going into why. Then all these thoughts just kind of start to fall down on her. And she's just kind of like realizing she's never going to get anything deeper from him. She doesn't think she's necessarily cut out for this fuck buddy thing. Like she feels like she's just not equipped to do this. And he of course says to her, because she tells him like, I don't think I can do this. And he tells her, just let me fuck this out of you, basically. And she's like, I can't, I'm sorry. Like, I can't do this. And she leaves. She goes home. She gets drunk, passes out, wakes up the next morning. She has a bunch of text messages. One of the messages is from James. And he says, can we talk today? She agrees to talk to him. So they meet up at a sports bar. And he just tells her how miserable he's been. And she asks him again, like, why? Why her? Why did you do it? And he's like, I don't know why it happened. And she said, that's what you keep telling me, but that's not good enough. And if you're not willing to tell me why, I don't think there's anything that's going to change. So he tells her, I don't want to hurt you any more than I already have. And she says, you need to tell me. And so he tells her that it was because she wasn't there for him anymore. When she started getting really involved in this project, it consumed her. And she didn't have time for him anymore. So basically, she used to be there to listen to him talk about his day, help him with any issues he was having at work. And then all of a sudden, she wasn't there, but the Becky, I'm going to say Becky bitch, because what a bitch, But she was. But that kind of lets me know. So basically, as long as her focus was completely you, you can be faithful. But the minute her attention started going to something that she was passionate about at work, you got to go fuck. You can't say, hey, we're not spending enough time together. Again, it's almost like you're using these small types of things that you allowed to get bigger and bigger and bigger because you wanted to be able to go and do some bullshit to blame it on her. So you are blaming her. Let's just be honest. And he was trying to say, no, I'm not blaming you for it, but you are. You're saying that Becky was there and you weren't. Which really irks me with people when you see that, okay, right now her job is demanding, right? So why does that mean you got to go fuck her best friend? See, 1 + 1 is always 2. And this bitch is trying to say it's 3, 4, and 5. And the truth is, he's just selfish. And he needs everything to be about him. And when she had something else to focus on, everything wasn't about him. And so he went and got someone who was going to make it about him. Again, trash. And I wouldn't have gave a fuck about no reconciliation with his ass. I just wouldn't have. I'm just saying. She winds up blurting out that she slept with someone. And he's like, what? Did you do this to hurt me? Again, right there. It's about fucking him. Nothing else. It's always about him. So you clearly can see he's just a selfish individual. And he's just fucking trash. And she said it was maybe a part of it. But it was also based on the effects of, what you done to me. And so she says, honestly, if we were supposed to be, I don't think we would have allowed these things to happen. Maybe we've just been holding on to this because we've known each other for 15 years. And so she leaves, she cries, she gets herself together and wants to not feel. And girl knows the perfect place to go where she can go and not feel. So our girl Lori winds up at Liam's place and he's, he opens the door and he's like, what do you want? And she's like, can I come in, please? So she comes in. She's like, is the offer still on the table? And he says, what offer? And she said the offer to not talk about anything personal or business related. And he says, so are you trying to just use me as a distraction? I don't know how I feel about that. So they do their little back and forth. He offers her something to drink, but she hasn't eaten. So he gives her some like crackers and cheese and vegetables, and she drinks a little wine. And he basically was like, you need to eat because you're going to, need your strength. And then afterwards he starts fingering her, and he kept edging her, and she was flipping out because she was so ready to come. And then finally he let her come, and he told her to go upstairs. I want you in my bed. But she wanted him in her mouth like right then and there. So she dropped to her knees. She sucked him until he came down her throat. And then they went upstairs. Next day, she goes to meet with the divorce lawyer. The divorce lawyer gives her the paperwork, tells her, I wish you guys would at least try counseling. It could possibly help. And she's like, I'll think about it. But she had wanted to do counseling. But James was like, no. So my thing is, if you're not willing to go to counseling, are you really even sorry? So she said she's going to deliver them herself. She feels like she needs to hand them to him because apparently he's been calling her every night, trying to apologize and just trying to see if she'll give him one more chance. So she goes to his job. Becky's there. And of course, the bitch is snarly. And she realizes that she never really knew her. But that lets me know that, bitch, you weren't paying attention either. Like, maybe you had a blind eye to what was really there. And she wasn't going to ask her, but she winds up asking Becky anyway, why she would do this. And that bitch told her, I've always wanted James. And when you stopped paying attention to him and needing him, I was there. And that's exactly what this bitch has probably never really been your friend. She saw something you had and she liked it. And she basically stayed and laid in wait. That's crazy. But that's so sad that she couldn't see any fucking signs. Like, some people are great. Don't get it twisted. And they can hide some shit. But I wonder if she just she didn't really know this girl. I think she just didn't really know her. And to me, because I'm quite sure she gave some kind of sign. She just wasn't paying attention, because I think it was so far-fetched her that her friend would do it to her, or that her husband would do it to her. That's what I think. And so James comes and gets her, takes her into the office, and he, of course, is like, did she say anything to you? Like, I'll go out there and I'll handle it, and all this type of shit. And she's like, no, I'm fine. So then she hands him the divorce papers, and he looks at them with such pure and utter disgust. And he is pissed. And he's like, no, don't do this. Don't throw us away. And he throws out the Hail Mary, and he says, I've made an appointment with a counselor, a family therapist, a marriage counselor. And so she says to him, why now? And he said, because I told you I would try anything. But see, that's my whole problem, because that should have been the first fucking thing. If you're going to do anything, and bitch, I tell you, well, then we need to go to counseling, because we clearly need help with communication to get to the root of this. How the fuck is that not something you're willing to do? But you can open your mouth and say, well, I'll do anything. Then you really won't. So then this makes me think, do you really want the marriage? Or are you using this as a way to keep her there? Is it really love, or is it because you're used to her? And she's actually a good woman. You fucking up. But do you really necessarily want her? You know what I'm saying? Like, it kind of feels like a little gamey to me. I still don't like him. I still don't feel sorry for him. I just don't. So she leaves, gets back to the office. Girl looks like complete and utter shit. Liam's by her desk, and he's like, you're late. She's like, I know. She's trying not to look at him. She doesn't want him to see, even she had fixed the mascara. It's running down again. And he's like, what happened? And she's like, nothing. I'm fine. Let's just work. So then he picks her arm up. He's like, we're leaving. He tells Sheila, we're having meetings. They're going to be, whatever is set for today, reschedule it for tomorrow. We have meetings off-site. And they left. So he takes her back to her house, which he got there with ease, which lets me know his ass probably be riding past there. He probably does it at night. I don't know, but something. So he takes her in. She at first is like, I can be by myself. I'm okay. He's like, I just want to make sure you're going to be all right. So she lets him come in. He runs her a bath. He says, I'll order some food. Make sure you're all right. Then I'll leave. And at first she fought it, and then she caved in and let him get in the bath with her. He asked her what happened. She told him. But she didn't tell him about James wanting to go to counseling, because it was kind of like she was getting this new side of him, and she wasn't trying to fumble that, So they get out. He orders Chinese food. They eat it. They watch mindless TV. Then he starts eating her pussy, makes her come. She wanted to suck him off, but he was like, tonight's just about you. So then they go upstairs. They get in the bed, and she was like, tell me something about you. And he says that when he was 12, his dad or his mom left his dad. He hasn't talked to his dad since he was 12, even after his mom passed away when he was like 20 years old. And he said his dad wasn't a bad man. He just wasn't necessarily a good one either. And that's all we get from him. So now, of course, she's even more confused, because it's like before she knew what the terms were, and now shit's getting kind of muddled. So the next week is basically she's either at his place or he's at hers. They're normal at work. They come home. They have phenomenal sex. So this particular morning, they have this heart fuck. And then afterwards, on his way out, he tells her he has a meeting. He's going to come in after lunch. She's like, oh, I didn't know you had anything on the schedule. He's like, I don't. It's personal. Hit her a little bit, but she's like, well, oh, well. Then she says this weekend she has an event to go to for her parents. And, so she's not going to be in. Well, no, not that she's not going to be in, but basically if he had any plans for the weekend, she's not going to be there. And he was like, oh, okay. So she gets a call from her mother. Her mother's like, oh, I only got one RSVP from you. And she's like, why is James not coming? So she tells her mother that she's divorcing James. Her mother is nonchalant about it, because she's just like, oh, you'll work through this. He takes really good care of you. Yeah, you'll be okay. You're just being over dramatic. Don't worry. I'll handle it. Hangs up the phone. So she calls James and lets him know that her mother's going to try and call him and get him to come to this event. And he says, I thought we weren't telling people anything. I thought, you were going to give us some more time and consider the counseling before you reach a decision, or have you already reached a decision? And she's like, I can't really talk right now because at this point, Liam is locked in on watching her. It's absolutely crazy. So when she gets off the phone, Liam was like, was that the husband? And she's like, yep. And he's pissed. And he's like, well, we have a meeting to get to. So the weekend hits. She gets to the event. And her mother's kind of okay with her. There's a seat sitting next to her that's open. Her mother basically says that she still extended the invitation to James. And but maybe James isn't going to show up. Maybe he's finally given up. And even though she knows she's the one that asked for the divorce, still hurts. And then she feels that prickly feeling that she only feels when Liam is watching her. She looks up and there he is. So she gets up to excuse herself and she's like, what are you doing here? You knew you were coming here and you didn't say anything. And he was like, no, I'm not here with. She looked around because she thought he was there with the date. And he's like, I'm not here with anybody. I know it's driving you crazy to think of someone else touching me. So she says, no, it doesn't. But you know it does. So then her father gets up to do his little speech and everything. And then she notices that Liam is now on stage with her father. And is saying how Anne's company, I can't think of the name of it right now, has been sold to Lori's dad's company. And she's looking crazy. She's like, oh my gosh, like I just got duped again. Like, we've been fucking all this time we've been spending in the office, and it's a whole fucking buyout going on. So she's pissed. And so after the announcement, her dad comes up to her and says, this is how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be working for family. Which, of course, is what she had been not wanting to do. So this, of course, is a whole mindfuck. Her father kind of dismisses her, leads her to go dance with Liam. Liam was like, I'm really sorry. I wanted you to know, blah, 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 blah. And then while they're dancing, James pops up. And James is like, you need to get the fuck away from my wife. And Liam is like, she doesn't belong to you anymore. And so she's freaking out because she's like, I cannot do this right now. And so she runs out of there. And when she gets to the car, James comes after her. And he's like, I just want to make sure you're okay. That's all. I just want to make sure you're okay. And he's like, I wish you could just tell me what's going on. But I understand I fucked up. And now you don't even feel comfortable to talk to me and tell me that type of stuff anymore. And so she just wants to leave. She wants to get the hell away from there. She gets back to the house and she's just like, she just needs to take control of her life. Like, she needs to stop letting these men decide things for her. She needs to figure her shit out on her own. And that is how book 1 ends. So the next book in the duet, the next and the last book in the duet series is called Embrace. And so we are going to dive into that one next week. Tell me what you guys thought of Entice. I really loved it. I am so not mad at her about sleeping with the other man. I'm just not, clearly he's a little, what's the word? Is it repressed? He clearly has some stuff that's going on because he's not opening up like a normal person necessarily would. So clearly he's got some secrets, and I am very anxious to find out what those secrets are. Drop down in the comment section below. Let me know what you guys think of book 1 in the duet series, Entice. If you are in the market for a beautiful notebook or journal, I do have a link listed below in the description section. So feel free to click there and buy you a new journal or notebook. Make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, I truly do thank you all for your support, and thank you for tuning in to the Always Reading Book Club.